Hi everybody, welcome to Monday. Yes, another Last of Us 2 video. Starting Ghost of Tsushima on Tuesday. And please join me, it's delightful. I have played through the tutorial. Sometimes I'll do that and then start over for Twitch. No, I'm leaving the tutorial and the opening cutscenes and everything like that for people to experience on their own. Because this is the game I actually do think deserves to be played. If you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LanaK. Please join me live on Twitch because this video, Twitch tomorrow night at 6. This video is actually inspired by a conversation we had on Twitch on Thursday. Oh, I'm fried today, guys. I apologize. A conversation we had on Thursday where two people who, based on the context of this the conversation, appeared to be gender non-conforming or trans. I didn't ask because it's not relevant. I know there are people who watch my content and who are patrons and things like that who are trans. I think that's amazing. I try to be sensitive to that. I try to provide content that is inclusive because my audience is so wide-ranging. But these two people were new, and they very sheepishly asked about the depiction of Lev and how Lev was handled in the game. Spoilers incoming, okay? This is Lev. Again, spoilers incoming. There is no way to discuss this without spoilers. So, this is Lev. Lev is a young trans man. I think he's about 14 years old when the game begins. Lev is played by Ian Alexander, who is a trans man actor in real life. Ian is 16 years old. But Lev is a kind of a member of the Seraphite faction in The Last of Us 2, which is a really cheesy cardboard religious cult that, instead of being interesting world building, primarily served to kind of be, I'm just going to come right out and say it, a leftist straw man for religion. I say this as a member of the left. I am progressive in my politics. But when it comes to religion, I realize I'm wearing a shirt that says "Holla back." So I make no secret of the fact that, you know, I myself am a religious person. I'm very cheeky about it, though. But the Seraphites are cardboard and cartoonish and a real missed opportunity. The only kind of remotely poignant moments, and blink and you'll miss them, come through Lev talking about his faith and how his faith guides him even though his people have rejected him. There has been some controversy surrounding this character and the dead naming that the character suffers in the game. I think that's not something I'm going to get into here because I do not have the experience of what dead naming does from the inside. That's a discussion better had. That's a point of view better presented by other people. Inverse has done a fairly bludgeoning article about it. Riley McLeod on Kotaku did a very nuanced article about it called "I Have Mixed Feelings." It's in the description box. I have mixed feelings about Last of Us Part 2. The central paragraph that I want to just share with you right now, but I do recommend you go and read it in its entirety. As a trans player, watching Lev suffering was difficult. It reminded me of painful moments from my own life and made a game that was hard to play even harder. I don't appreciate it for that. I don't need a video game to remind me of the struggles I faced as a trans guy, but I'm not angry at it for reminding me of them either. The anger I felt at The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't that it showed me my own suffering, but that I never felt like the story rose above demonstrating that suffering exists. As I wrote in my review, eventually my numbness turned to an anger I've never felt about a video game. Late one night, I paused the game and asked ask myself aloud if the developers thought I was stupid, if they thought the existence of violence had just never occurred to me before. The Last of Us Part 2 is diverse, but it doesn't do anything with that diversity besides point back to pain. So that is the perspective of one trans man who happens to be a very good writer based on this article. And the Kotaku review is worth reading too. Link description box, moving on. I'm going to take a different approach here regarding Lev and some of the stuff surrounding Lev in this game. I am not coming at this as a person who identifies as male. I am coming at this as a person who is gender nonconforming in a great many ways. You may notice from all the stuff behind me. And my own personal navigation with sex role and gender identity, or gender roles and gender identity, and how they muddy those two things in The Last of Us 2 in a way I really wish they hadn't. I'm not going to say that what they did here is an artistic mistake, because fictional stories are the story of those particular people. Now, one of the things that Riley McLeod's article on Kotaku talks about is the fact that the problem trans representation gets into in media is there's often only one trans person at any given time represented. And so it's hard to sort of show the diversity of the trans experience when there's one person, right? So, fair point. I can, however, talk about a thing culturally we keep getting hung up on. It is a major dynamic of J.K. Rowling's rantings, and a fundamental lack of understanding of what a non-cisgendered gender identity is, what it means for your identity to not match the sex you were assigned at birth. And the mistake The Last of Us 2, I'll call it a mistake. We're not there yet in terms of our understanding to muddle things this way and still get the pass for being a sensitive, informed portrayal. So it's not an artistic mistake, but in terms of representation, it's a mistake. Hope that makes sense. Lev's story, again, I said big spoilers, is that they said references to how he felt inside, but the straw that was like, that's it, you shall not pass for Lev, is that the cult decided that Lev was going to be married off to some warrior. And there's instances of dead naming when you encounter the Seraphites, which some trans people had real problems with. I just thought it was a ham-handed way to make Abby's killing more sympathetic than Ellie's killing in the game. It seems to have backfired in this instance. But the Lev shaving his head, because that's what the male warriors in the Seraphites do. His sister, Yara, is also a warrior, but they determined that Lev, I guess, wasn't good enough to be a warrior, so Lev was going to be married off to a warrior. Why warriors can't also be mothers, they never really dealt with. It's odd. But, you know, it's a cult bad. So let's throw all these like straw arguments at the wall, right? I already said it's cardboard in a cartoon. But the game muddles Lev's gender identity of male and the cult's gender role of warrior slash wife and the shaving of heads and all this stuff. And this is exactly what J.K. Rowling is getting wrong in her nonsense fear-based garbage as well. And so I think it needs to be talked about. Okay. What is gender identity? Gender identity is one's internal sense of self in terms of gender. It is, without thinking about it, are you male, female, or neither? And the first thing that comes to mind, without really thinking about it, that's most people's gender identity. Some people hesitate. They don't know the answer. And that's not, I don't like wearing dresses. I don't like wearing makeup. I don't like playing with dolls as opposed to playing with action figures. That's how you feel inside. What you identify as. That's a tender thing that doesn't change with culture changing. Meanwhile, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be third and fourth and fifth genders, depending on the culture, that is different than an identity. A gender role is a society's expectations of members of a certain assigned gender. They are not the same. Trans people do not become trans because they don't like what being a man or being a woman means. People are trans from birth. It is an innate thing. It's just like you can't remember we had all these fights 15, 20 years ago. God, it's more than that now. About whether someone is basically born gay or they can turn gay or something like that. People like J.K. Rowling think, all these women will decide to be men because they don't like what being a woman means. That's not what it is. And that's what The Last of Us 2 kind of implies in the way they muddy it, in the way that... And the way they set this up, I want to be clear. They should not have spent a lot of time. Let's put Lev up here again so you can see who I'm talking about while I talk about Lev's story. You should not do some articles call it walking around trans. I call it the stand there and be trans phenomenon, where trans characters do this speech immediately upon a character meeting them about what it's like to be trans and their trans story. People don't do that in the real world. They don't. It's awkward. It's artificial. It is considered bad writing. Now, The Last of Us 2 does avoid that. But a general problem with the game is that it throws so much at the wall that there is no time to have any depth or nuance to any of it. Everything is just political signaling. This good, this bad, her good, her bad, him bad, him not as bad because him Lev. It's all like cave people diversity, right? Good. Hulk say bad, bigot sandwich smash, Hulk smash, bigot sandwich, then wipe bigot sandwich off fist because bigot sandwich bigot. And so any nuance is lost. And this is why I feel like it's extremely important, and I think that it's extremely important to take this opportunity to inform people who are interested that being trans is not about not liking what it means to be a boy or a girl. And this is what pissed me off about what J.K. Rowling did. Because my whole life I have not liked what it means to be a girl. I don't, you may notice, I don't like the things that women usually like. I don't do the things that women usually do. I don't talk the way that women usually talk, and so on and so forth. I have to actively remember to be more emotional in my language because that is not necessarily how I am wired. I am a systemized logician. I'm not a person who perceives the world through feelings. This causes issues because of society's expectations of women as opposed to society's expectations of men. If men are too emotional in their communications, then they're a whiny little bitch. If women are not emotional enough in our communications, then we're a frigid bitch. You notice how the word is just applied to anybody who doesn't, properly model, properly perform expected sex roles. This is why I tried not to use the word. I used it there for effect to demonstrate the problem. Someone who is not traditionally masculine is still a man. You cannot take away someone's masculine identity because they fail some arbitrary performance test, okay? And this is my issue with what The Last of Us 2 does without getting into the dead naming or all the ham-handed writing or any of that. It's that people don't understand the whole trans thing enough yet to muddy it the way they did. If they had made the whole game about Lev and Abby and just gone there, perhaps they'd have more time to unpack it. Personally, I would have preferred, it's a religious cult. It's a complementarian religious cult with a matriarchal female leader that we never even really see. It's weird, but it is enough in cardboard villainous fictional cultures like that for a person to be excommunicated or to be severely punished because they don't conform. They didn't need the forced marriage to explain, this bigot sandwich element of the narrative. And so by mucking it up, they shot themselves in the foot in terms of representation and diversity. I consider representation and diversity two different things. There's two different ways to go with it, right? I mean, look at the Hamilton approach, right? Hamilton the musical is based on intentional anachronisms. Thomas Jefferson being a slave owner in real history, being played by a black guy in the musical. The intention behind that was, according to Lin-Manuel Miranda, that this is our history too. America's our culture too. So why can't we play George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and I've been watching Perry Mason, so I wanted to say Aaron Burr. Very different Burr. But that is different. That is diversifying Broadway casting, right? Why can't, Eliza Hamilton be played by a Chinese girl? She was in the touring cast when I saw it up here in Toronto. Things like that, right? Like, why not? Why not? Why is the founding of America an inherently white story when fictionalized this way? That's diversity. Representation is a different fulcrum, right? It's a different metric. It's, we want to normalize depictions of people who are marginalized and persecuted by involving them in our stories. And the way that ideally works is you start with positive, very clear representations so that people get the idea, people get the basics, and then you get more nuanced. What tends to happen is it starts with stereotypes. You know, be it, you know, the depictions of black people in Gone with the Wind, the Song of the South, which you can't even watch anymore. It's considered so horribly offensive. With trans people, it's that it was interesting because in like 70s cop shows, there was always like a trans prostitute. They used a different word that we don't use anymore, but that was like the only depiction, and then it sort of went away for a while, and now it's sort of come back in a much more sort of nuanced, broadened portrayal that sort of encompasses a lot more of the trans experience. But like, there's an example of, okay, they were included, but not in a positive way. That's not usually what people are talking about when they talk about inclusion, right? And so to have this trans boy who is also part of a cult, who was also subject to really rigid gender it's a lot. It's a lot. And the problem is, if we lived in a different world, having a trans person who also rejected the gender roles that a society placed on them would just be a character. All right, that's their story. People are allowed to be more than one thing at a time. The problem we get into here is that most people don't recognize that gender identity and gender roles are different things, because a lot of people have a very hard time trying on a perspective that is not their own. And so the idea that you feel decidedly at odds with the way other people are identifying you is the only way I can even remotely describe it as somebody, as I've talked about before, who has a very weak gender identity personally, is if you are a religious person, or, you know, take the identity of gamer. Some people identify as a gamer without a second thought. Other people don't identify as gamers. They're just people who play games. Now, gamers who identify as gamers have real issues. They are very sensitive to pejorative, gamer being used as a pejorative, gamer being associated with, you know, negative things, or people flat out saying that the gamer identity is either not real or needs to end. People just have this gut reaction to that, right? It feels like an attack. It feels like an assault. That's what happens to people whose identities don't line up with what people call them. That is not the same as body dysphoria. That is a subset of trans people. Now, there are indications as the game goes on that Lev also has, you know, with the shaving the head, with the deliberate steps to make his body look more like what his identity tells him it sort of should look like. There is an element of dysphoria in Lev as well, that the game doesn't really think through, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. As you see, Lev doesn't just some trans people. I mean, the actor who plays Lev, Ian Alexander, has a very different relationship with gender. If you here's I'll bring up a single picture instead of multiple ones. It might be too overwhelming in this view. Here's Ian Alexander in real life. Now, Ian Alexander uses male pronouns. Ian Alexander identifies male. But as you'll notice, Ian Alexander here is wearing makeup and 2 earrings, which is generally more associated with feminine performance, but Ian Alexander is male. The same way Boy George is male. So Ian Alexander, male actor, does not perform his gender the same way that Lev, male character, does. This is the difference. Ian Alexander is no less male because he decides to wear makeup and embroidered flowers on his clothes than Lev is because he dresses more in line with what people expect from men. Does that make sense? Like, hopefully it makes sense, because this stuff is really important, because a lot of people are currently being cut off from expressions of themselves that they feel is authentic because of these expectations people have of men and of women. And I mean, artists from like Marlene Dietrich to Madonna and so on and so forth, they do a little bit of it with like Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That there's a spoiler modern day scene where it's either Cassandra or Alexios, depending on who you pick, but no matter what, they're wearing a suit. And Cassandra in a suit is hotter than shit. But at no point do they suggest that Cassandra has a male identity. No, Cassandra's female. And this is where things get, people have a really hard time wrapping their heads around what appear to be inconsistencies to them, because they are confusing gender role for gender identity. And this is why it's really important when games beat us over the head with inclusion and don't want to just be judged on, a paradigm of art, but want to be judged as taking some sort of great strides. There's clearly a political bent to The Last of Us 2. It is clearly making a point. And the minute you step into activist media, you are accountable when you fuck that up. When you mischaracterize something or when you muddle something, that's different than somebody who's like, I just want to tell a story. For instance, if somebody just wanted to write a story because they are trans and they want to write a story about a trans person and they want to make them messy and, like Insecure does, she's not trans, but what Insecure does for the Black female experience, that show's not my thing. Because I can't stand, sympathetic portrayals of people who cheat on their significant others. But that's just my personal, I don't like that in my media. There's too much of that in the world. But the people who make that show are deliberately trying to make that messy and trying to make the character imperfect. And great, that's diversity. That is inclusion. There's no... That's like in the same bucket as Hamilton. There's no bigger point beyond it than just, we can do this too. We can be just as fucked up as white people are. That's the purpose of that project, right? That's not, we are standing up for all that is good in the world. Hulk think violence and bigot sandwich bad, right? The show isn't preaching at you the same way. And so that's why I made this video. I just wanted to take the opportunity to let people know what's really going on. So here comes the shit from Last of Us 2 stands. I know, maybe they're bored or tired out or whatever now, but help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.